right, welcome to lesson 3. We have right now covered the basics of what the Watermelon platform is, and you now hopefully know about the requirement management and defect management part of the life cycle. So let's get down to things which are closer to automation, and we are going to start talking about the architecture of how the recording part of Watermelon works. We're going to go through the concepts of what the important components of recording are, which you as a tester need to be aware of, and how they essentially work both for web recording and mobile recording. These are conceptual details which you need to know because when something goes wrong during recording, you need to know what exactly to articulate as the problem. So let's go ahead and understand what those important concepts are, which we need to be aware of. Let's get down to it. Now, when it comes to recording, here's a few architectural concepts that you need to keep at the back of your mind. So let's now assume that you are here to go ahead and automate some of your applications, which could be things like A1 and A2 and so on. Now, apart from your applications, you also have the application's backend, you have databases of your application, files that are being used by the application, APIs, and so on and so forth, right? Now, since we're talking about web recording, you are accessing these applications as a tester through your browser. Yeah? Now, this is your application ecosystem. And then in some other part of your network, and as part of this training, this is actually in the Watermelon cloud. In a real life situation, this would be in a different part of the customer's data center, but in its own little subnet, in its own environment, which is hosting Watermelon. Now, Watermelon actually is a Kubernetes-based microservices infrastructure. So it has more than 16 or 17 pods running. We don't need to know all of them as part of this particular course. We need to know a few important ones. There is a pod for the controller, which makes the server and whatever you render on the screen visible. You also have a specific service or a pod to do the recording. You also have a specific pod or a service to execute what has been recorded. And there are many other things as well. We'll learn about one more of those. But just remember, for important thing, there's your infrastructure and there's the Watermelon infrastructure. Now, what makes your infrastructure communicate with the Watermelon infrastructure for the purpose of web-based application recording is a component called the extension. Now, this extension is given to you by Watermelon, and you need to install it on your Chrome or Edge browsers. Yeah, this extension comes to you in the form of a CRX file, or it comes to you as a link to a Google Play Store or an Edge Play Store extension. We'll be giving the link to this extension in the description of this video, but do remember that this extension always keeps getting updated. So when you're using it, you can either use what's been given as part of this link in this description of this video, or you can request the latest extension from your Watermelon team as well. We'll go ahead and see how to run this extension. And let's do that the moment we finish understanding a few more concepts. Important thing to remember, the job of this extension on your browser is to help you send recording information from the application into Watermelon. So essentially, the extension kind of picks up all the locators, all the details about your application, and converts it into a no-code block form for the Watermelon infrastructure to convert into a fully formed automation script. Important thing to remember, if something is not working while recording, it's probably because of the fact that the extension can't talk to the Watermelon infrastructure. So just keep in the back of your mind that the job of the extension is to record. There is no other job that the extension actually has. It's only to capture locator information from the application and send it to Watermelon to convert it into an automation script. Now, this is when we are recording. Now, obviously, after recording, after we add more testing logic into the script, somebody needs to play it back, right? Now, one of the ways in which the system actually executes the automation is by executing it on another component of the Watermelon infrastructure called the grid. Now, the grid is nothing but another service, just like the controller, the recorder, the executor, and so on. The executor actually communicates with the grid infrastructure, which you can think of as a collection of different browsers, right? So you're going to have something like a Chrome browser, an Edge browser, Firefox, an Opera, different Safari, different kinds of browsers on the grid, which is part of the Watermelon infrastructure. So it's not executing on your local machine. There is an option to do that, but we'll talk about that later. Uh, Typically, by default, the way that automations execute is on the Watermelon grid. What this means is these the grid actually kind of behaves like a person who is having access into your application and is executing the automations auto-generated by Watermelon. So the extension is creating the recordings, which is creating the automation scripts, and the grid is where those automation scripts are getting executed, which means the grid needs to have access to your applications. The grid needs to have access to all your applications. It needs to have connectivity, right? So if your grid isn't able to reach, let's say, bits of your application or your database or your APIs and so on and so forth, the grid cannot execute what it needs to. Yeah? So just remember those things, and let's go ahead now and see how you are going to install this executor on your browser. So to install the extension, you got to go to our Chrome Web Store page. Please use the link and don't try to search for it in the Chrome Web Store because this extension is a private extension. It's not exposed as a public link on the web page. So you will have this extension link at the bottom of the video. Go ahead and use that to install the extension. You can always check the version of the extension right here, and you can make sure during your discussions with Watermelon whether this is whether this is a good enough latest extension to use or not. Right now, you see we are using the one from 4 or 5 months ago, which is just great. But do remember that this extension keeps getting added. So you need to basically go ahead and right now I have it with me, so that's why it's not giving me the option to add. But you can go ahead and add this extension and have it out here in your Watermelon environment. The other way to add an extension is to go to the extension page of your browser, whether it's Chrome or whether it's Edge, and you might be given an extension that looks like this, that looks like a CRX file by your Watermelon counterparts. You can simply take that extension and drop it on the browser page like this. Yeah, it should install automatically, and you're going to go ahead and have that extension out here. Make sure that this is enabled to make sure that the extension is enabled. Go ahead and do these following steps in your extension. Turn on the developer mode, which is right here on your screen. Yeah. Go into the extension details, and this works in exactly the same way whether you're on Chrome or whether you're on Edge. Yeah. And turn on these options. Make sure that you turn on the option for the extension to work in incognito, give it access to file URLs, and give it the permission to collect errors. That's all you need to do. If you do these three things, you're good to go for your web recording. If you do all of these things, you should have this extension enabled in your browser. Again, the same thing whether you're doing it on Chrome or whether you're doing it on Edge. An interesting thing to remember is that when you are doing mobile application recording, there is no extension in the picture. You don't have to worry about an extension being there for doing mobile application recording. Mobile application recording, when we come to that, we can see that it happens in three ways. You can either record and play back your mobile application automations on a physical device, or you can do that using a device emulator, or you can do it using an integration that you have with third-party browser farms like Lambda Test or Browser Stack. For this training, we'll be using Lambda Test, but do remember that you have the option to do it either from this kind of third-party browser farms or from physical devices or using emulators. All of these have slight technical nuances when it comes to the installation and working, but as an automator, the experience of automating and executing remains pretty much exactly the same. This is just something to remember. Again, repeating, for mobile automation, there is no need of an extension. So let's have a look at what should happen if we have set up our extension properly and if everything is communicating with each other. So you're going to go ahead and log into your sandbox instance. I'm using the one that I have. You should use the link that has been provided to you for the purpose of this training. Now I'm going to go ahead and go into functional testing. You should be in a project that has your AUT added. We have already covered how to add AUTs and things like that in the second video of this course. So I'm not going to repeat all that. I'm going to assume that you already have the application under test in the system. Yeah. Now I have multiple applications. You can see I have some web applications called Apply Insurance, Underwriting, and Administration. I also have some mobile applications. Let's have a look at what the situation should be. So I'm going to go ahead to my test case repository. I'm going to go ahead very quickly and create a test case. I'm going to call it my first web recording. And I'm going to choose an objective to it and say that I want to go ahead and do the apply insurance. Remember, we're not doing anything really fancy. We're just testing whether our extension works and whether the connectivity between various systems is running or not. Essentially, a test whether Watermelon is doing its job. So I can go ahead to this place. Now, the way that I activate the extension is by going ahead and clicking the start recording. Of course, you need to make sure that your extension is installed and enabled at this point. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my application. Watermelon pulls it up. I'm just going to go ahead and all right, I'm going to just fill in some details in my application just to see if all the things are working properly. All right. Let's go ahead and make sure that we go to the next step. Oh, all right, here we go. This is a functioning demo application that we spoke about in video 2. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the last step and do a very quick validation of, let's say, what the premium amount was. We're going to go through how this AI bot works and things like that in our next video. All right, so we do that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Looks like everything is fine. I'm going to save it. And to test whether the extension, now this was the recording part of it, which is done by the extension. Now when I execute this, this is going to be executed on the Watermelon grid. So I'm going to go ahead, take the test case that I just created. I'm going to say execute in one of our environments. We have already spoken about environments in our last video. I'm going to choose the grid which we will use, which is the WM grid, as you know. I'm going to choose a couple of browsers which are on the grid. And if you remember, a grid is nothing but a collection of the browsers which get spun up. We don't have any test data right now. We're going to do it in the next test case. And let's go ahead and see whether the system actually runs it. If this is working, you know that your execution is working, Watermelon is set up properly, the grid is able to access the application, and so on and so forth. All right. So we can see that the application is getting automated. You should be able to see the live screen. Yep. So we are able to see that it's working. Whether it passes or fails is a different matter. Let's wait for it to finish. You can see it's running on different browsers, which means that the grid is actually spinning up different browsers when you execute. Let's go ahead and just wait for this to finish the flow. Anyway, so whether it passes or fails is a different matter. We are not really bothered about it. We have gone ahead and concluded what we wanted to check. In our next video, we'll go ahead and check why certain things are passing, why certain things are failing, and so on and so forth. We're going to do all of that in our next video. Let's wait for this to pass or fail. Just a second. Give it a few seconds. This is the part where you should ideally pause the video, make sure that all of this is happening in your environment, and get back to this video when it has finished. So let's give it a few seconds. So the test case is finished. You can see the results of every step. Now, why it passes, why it fails, we're gonna look at in the next video. You can also see that there is an auto heal algorithm, which we'll talk about. You can also see that that's triggering off. Different at every step, you'll be able to see the screenshots that are taken by the algorithm as evidences for testing. The other thing that you can test for is whether the video is getting captured. You can click on that video icon and see whether the entire execution video is getting captured. All right, so the web automation, recording, executing is happening. What people can also do at this point is, as testers, if something is failing, you can go ahead and have the system go ahead and check that something is failing and why it's so. Yeah, so you can see over here, it was meant to go ahead and capture the premium, but the screen didn't move to the premium screen. Again, we'll come to the reasons for all of this in the future videos. But what we're going to do is, if this was a scenario, you could go ahead and log a defect from the screen itself, and you could tell that the application did not move to the second screen with valid data on the first, something on those lines, right? I'm going to go ahead and categorize it in a proper way, and I'll go ahead and raise the defect. All of this seems to be working fine. Let's also go ahead and test whether my first mobile recording is gonna work. So let's go ahead and choose a mobile system. I'm going to go ahead and choose the same applications mobile. Now here, if you remember, we do not need the extension to do any mobile recording. And in our training setup, we are using Watermelon's Lambda test. I am at least using Watermelon's Lambda test. Depending on the environment that you are in, you might have a different mobile testing for your training. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my Lambda test farm. Yeah, I'm going to choose some kind of a mobile device. I'm choosing a Galaxy S24, as you can see, and I got to wait for the Galaxy S24 to fire up. Let me check in my backend whether my Lambda test is actually firing this up for me. You may not be able to do this. You may not have access into your Lambda test directly. I can do this because I'm administering the system itself. As a tester, you will just be looking at this screen alone. So let's give it a few seconds for the Lambda test to fire up our device, and you can see that the S24 is getting provisioned, and agent needs to be installed on it, and you can see the device has come up. So as a tester, you should be able to see this pop up on your screen at any moment. All right, here we go. We are going to go through these nuances of how we are going to test this very in much detail. So I'm going to go ahead and just test a couple of steps just to see whether the execution is working or not. You can see that the way that you do mobile testing is very subtly different from the way that you do web testing, but we are going to go through all the details of that. Let's just leave it to here for now. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to save it. And now, in a contrast to your web execution, which we were doing on the grid, mobile executions are done on the device farms of choice. Yeah. So again, I choose the environment, and now I choose the device farm on which I want to execute on. I can, if you remember the previous video, do it on physical devices. I can do it on emulators. I can do it on third-party device farms. In this training, we are doing it on the third-party device farm, which in my case is, of course, the Lambda test farm itself. So let me go ahead and choose some kind of an Android system. And we can choose, one of the things that you can do in Watermelon is you can actually record on one device, play it back on another, and so on and so forth. Our intent right now is just to see whether uh, the system is working in a manner that is sane. All right. So you can see that the S24 Ultra is being provisioned. This is the test case execution. Yeah. We already finished the recording. And of course, good thing to remember, neither web execution nor mobile execution has anything to do with the extension. The extension is only for web recording. Yeah. Good thing to remember that. Give it a few seconds for the device to get provisioned. You can see that it came up, and you can see that the automation is working. Yeah, it goes ahead and enters the things that I asked it to enter. Thing is passed. Same as web, you can see the screenshots. Same as web. It takes a couple of minutes for the video to come from your device farm to Watermelon. You'll be able to see the video as well. If I want to, I can go ahead and log the defect too. All right. So what did we do in this video? We went ahead and understood what the basic architecture is. We know now how to install the extension on Chrome and Edge. We also know how to check for the sanity of the system before we go ahead and start executing. Let's go to the next video and get into the deep innards of web automation.